Geocachomaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome back to GeoGearHeads. This is episode 285. I'm Daryl W4. Unfortunately, Chris of the Northwest is having some technical problems. Thank you, Windows Update. So we're going to start without him. And that voice that you just heard is G Slink, and you might know him better as Gary from the GeoTalk podcast. And also, I said GeoTalk, didn't I?
It's okay.
I always want to do that. I don't know why. That was why can't I remember his name?
WV Tim does that too. He called that's that GeoTalk show.
Yeah, no, there was Steve Sandy is his name, but Pedantic. That was his show.
Yeah,
he had like the first show. It was called GeoTalk, but that was way back when, and pod faded after like 7 episodes or whatever. In any case, so yeah, no, you're the Geocache Talk.
Geocache
Talk. And also the 201 geocaches to find before you die, which is one of the reasons we've got you on to talk about list building today.
Yes, most definitely.
So hopefully Chris will get through these window updates, which he just sent me a message that he's at 54%. So
we get a running total as the.
I figure he'll jump in sometime near the end of the show.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, you know,
that way I've done all the work, and you've done all of the info in the show, and then he can just jump in and take the credit at the end.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he'll do. I know we know Chris. That's what he's going to do.
Well, he used to be the bad cop, after all.
I know he was. No longer.
He's no longer the bad cop. He left that behind him.
Yes.
So let's get right into our subject tonight, and that is the building of lists. And we're not necessarily talking about the list feature at geocaching.com, but that's probably the most popular one that most people are going to think of immediately. That is a premium feature for anyone who's wondering where it is. If you're not a premium member, you don't have it. And in most places, it's called a bookmark list. In the app itself, it's just called a list. In the geocaching app.
But anybody can make a list. You don't have to be a premium member to make a list.
Well, you can make your own list.
Right.
But you can't make a bookmark list on geocaching.com.
Right.
And it won't sync to all of your devices, and
all that good stuff.
There's certainly other ways to make lists, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this, is especially with some of the different reasons that you might want to do that list on geocaching.com is not necessarily the best way to do it. One of the things that I used to do, and we talked about a little bit on caches along a route, with, I do the caches along a route, do this search, and then I go and cherry pick and add them to a bookmark list. But I usually don't leave them on that bookmark list. I'll take them and drop them into, for a long time I was using Evernote, but that's so heavy and icky that I almost never use that anymore. A lot of the time, I'll drop it into Google Doc or even into a Google Sheet, because that way it's something I can edit right on the phone still and share with friends. And, we have our group caching list put together that way.
Yeah. Hearing that Daryl is not using Evernote, that's sort of a shock to me.
Oh, that happened about 2 years ago now.
I know, but for a long time there, Evernote was the thing.
Yeah. Well, and then like shortly after we did the last show on Evernote, they really overhauled the app, and it got just unusable.
Yeah, clunky.
So yeah, it's a terrible shame, and they've been trying to fight their way back, but it's so terrible that I almost never use Evernote anymore. I just keep it around basically because I have so much information in Evernote that I can't get rid of.
Right.
I can't easily migrate a lot of that stuff either. But I keep looking for something that's going to fill that gap. And really at this point, most of what I'm doing is in the Google Docs and Sheets, for different reasons, but it still doesn't do what I really liked out of Evernote. It's still a little too heavy, but at least it's better than Evernote is, if that makes sense.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
White Coaster, total aside, but White Coaster in the live chat talking about your show, I think this weekend, said
Yep.
that he found a Munzie on the weekend. It was on a piece of paper folded up in a small container under the skirt at the bottom of a flagstaff.
Hey, that's
This sounds like some of the caches I found.
it does. Well, you know that that's how Susan she put in the chat room too. Told Gary that we should look in her skirts for Munzies, and I keep telling her there are no Munzies under the LPC skirt, and then she's like, "Well, let's see." So that one day she popped the skirt out, and out came a geocache. It's like, oh, I guess we should have checked to see if there was a geocache here too. Like, I guess we can log it.
Nice.
So we found it by mistake. It was great.
Those accidental cache finds.
Right, exactly.
But it reminded me of a list that we should probably mention real quickly on geocaching.com. Again, you have to be a premium member, but there is an ignore list. So if there's a cache that you really don't want to do for whatever reason, because it's, really junky one that's under a lamp skirt and you just refuse to do it, or, behind a no trespassing sign and you don't want to risk it, which, don't. But whatever the reason, all you have to do is go to that cache page and hit ignore, and it saves it to the list. You can get back to that list later if you want to unignore, and that's just under your profile. So
it's really handy to have.
Yeah, and it's a really good tip. However, in the pocket queries, and this is one of the things that kind of bothers me, you have to select to ignore them on your ignore list. Shouldn't it be include?
Mm-hmm.
They're on my ignore list. I don't want to see them. So why do I have to check the box to say that I don't want to see them?
Right. Yeah, that's sort of counterintuitive. You don't want them, therefore you shouldn't have to ever check on them.
Yeah. Well, and there are valid reasons why you might actually want to go back and see those caches that you've ignored. Like, let's say you want a list of all of the caches in your area so that you can go out and place caches and know where those are.
Oh, so true. That's true.
Yeah. Then give me then let me check that box that says, show me the ignored caches.
Right.
So it's another one of those things that they did early on in Remains, and eventually when they get around to changing the pocket queries function, that's going to change too, I'm sure. But for now, keep in mind that that's a glitch, as I'll call it. It's not.
Yeah.
It wasn't intentional, so it's not a glitch, but it's a glitch in the way in the interface there.
Yep.
So getting back to the list.
Yes.
If I'm in like Google Doc, if I'm in Evernote, if I'm in the spreadsheets, and the spreadsheets can be really good if you're trying to do trip planning, because you can put like estimated times in there, and we've done some of these runs where it's really, really important to hit these caches. You have your primary targets, and then there's these secondary ones. So I'll put the times and the drive times expected and calculate it out, and we have to be to the hotel by like 7 o'clock so that we can be at the event at 8 o'clock.
Right. Yep.
So, you have to kind of sometimes do that. And the spreadsheets are awesome for that because you can calculate all that stuff out. You set it up so that you put in the time at that last cache, and hey, I've got extra time. I can go and hit these other ones.
Do you ever then try to incorporate them into a Google Maps and make a map list so that you get a general idea of, because I know in Google Maps, you can take several items and you could put them in and make it almost like a station to station kind of.
Yeah. The stops in between. I usually don't use Google Maps because I've typically, when I do my driving, I navigate by Navigon.
Okay.
So I do it from Navigon, and I do exactly that, which is take the caches, load them in to Navigon, put together the caches in the order that I want them, and just take a look at the drive time between the different stops.
Right.
Because if I do it through something other than what I'm going to use to navigate, then I run into problems where it's a different route and different times when I actually get around to driving it.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about something like a major city. That's where it really can get
Chris just texted me, so I think he's getting closer. He's at 75% a little while ago, but he said he uses Microsoft Map Point to calculate the route stops and timing.
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Excellent.
It doesn't, there's all kinds of apps that will do all kinds of stuff like this for you. It's not a big deal. I've even done on some of the shorter ones where I don't necessarily want to map out everything because I don't really need to.
Mm-hmm.
I've just gone and done, okay, here's the 2 points, the two caches in Google Maps. Just what's the time?
Right. Estimated
just
time.
So, sure. Yeah, just so I can get it between those two and figure out my routing that way. But where I was going before I got into that tangent about why I use Sheets, one of the things that's really handy is grab that code or coord.info, the cord.info URL, which is just cord.info / the GC number.
Yep.
And you can use that for linking. And I always do that because that way I can just tap on the GC number in the name. A lot of the times what I'll do is actually link the name, put the GC number in a separate field or a separate area so that I can easily copy and paste that, because if it's the URL and you tap it, it goes to the cache page.
Right.
Yeah, but it will also, I think it still does it on both Android and iOS. If you hit that link, it will actually load it up in the geocaching app as well. So you don't have to do it on the cache page.
Yeah, it will. It'll put it in. It doesn't put them in any kind of order. I mean, it'll just pop it in.
No. But when you click that link, it brings up that cache.
Yeah, no, it does.
So it's even a way around like loading a list into a caching app. So if you have, you can do shared lists as well.
Oh yeah,
geocaching.com.
Yep.
But you can't load that in through the API if it's a shared one. It has to be your own. So when you're going caching as a group, if you have it in something like a Google Doc, then you can go and do the links from there. Or you can also, as a premium member, take a shared list and create your own GPX file from that, your own pocket query.
Right.
Unfortunately, you can't do anything with the list directly yet. And I think that's going to be coming as they work on the lists and everything else. But it's going to be a while.
It would be handy because there's plenty of times when either an event and people always want a GPX file at the event, or even if you're going out with a small group of people, everybody kind of wants to have that list. If somebody's created the list, or you've made that list together, you want everybody to have it, so it's much easier to cache that way.
Yeah. Team Maviju in the live chat says that the schedule is pretty much out the window whenever he gets stuck in traffic and has to go to search for the cache. I'm not going to read what he said in the next part. I got distracted, and it's not appropriate for the show.
No, it's okay. But it's something that Susan and I did. We were at Moga, was talking about lists. We had created some lists. Moga was in Manhattan, but it was close to Kansas City, and so ahead of time we'd created a list of caches we wanted to find. And of course, one of them was Missouri's oldest, which is over in Kansas City. The trick is, and this is something you're talking about with lists, is we found caches we wanted to find, but we had to factor in the fact that our end point was now 2 hours west. So we had to figure out, okay, we got to be done at this point, and we're not going to be close to our end point until we drive back, because there was an event that night that we made it to. But we planned, like you said, a little planning. But had we not have made the list ahead of time, I don't know if we would have thought in advance, oh, are we this close to Missouri's oldest? Because you don't know where in the state the oldest cache is unless you look. I mean, it could be anywhere. So,
well, and that's kind of one of the things I found really is necessary when I build these lists, is to make sure I have these are the caches I really want to hit column, and here are the caches I'd like to hit column. It could just be like a signifier that says, primary, secondary. But that way I know, okay, I'm going to remove this cache so we don't have to stop there. And I always build in like a 10-minute stop at each of the caches whenever I'm putting in those times. So that I get a good feel for, what it's going to do. Or, and sometimes, I always take a look at where the parking and everything is too.
Right.
But sometimes it's like, okay, this is going to be our lunch stop. I'm going to build in like an hour stop here.
Yeah, right. Well, and you have to assume some things, and you probably need to do more investigating to find out what kind of cache it is to know how far, like Missouri's oldest, you can't park near it. So you have to factor in the closest parking, and you have a nice walk along the creek to get to this cache. And then you have a nice walk back. But you have to factor, like you said, you have to factor that stuff in. I like what Limax put in the chat room, because the difficult part was not stopping for all the other caches in the area.
See, and this is one of the reasons I like to build the list, because I'll build the list, build a GPX from that list, the pocket query, and I put only that on the phone or on the GPS. Right. So I don't see the other ones, because it is so tempting to make this stop.
Just another one. We just could do one more. No, one more. Now that's good for geocaching on Christmas.
Yeah. There's certain,
because you want to find everything.
Just go for everything. You look, right. Okay, here's a pocket of a lot of caches. I'm going there.
Right.
But when you're trying to get from point A to point B, not so much.
Not so much. Yeah. When you're not mass hitting like you guys do that day. What's the highest you've ever done that day, by the way?
I've only done the geocaching day once, and I think we hit 101 that day.
Right, because you start up just after midnight, right?
No, we start at sun up and we go basically to sundown.
Oh, okay.
So it's not even 12 hours of caching.
Oh, okay.
But the most I've done was, I want to say 207 in a day.
Wow.
I might be off with that number, but it's something like that. But we've been talking about all these travels, and it's an excellent reason for the list. But there's also the lists of things like, here are the caches that I want to hit eventually.
Right.
Here are the awesome caches that people have told me about.
Your bucket list.
Yeah, you actually did the book, which is essentially your bucket list.
Yeah. This is interesting. Yeah, I've got a copy of the book right here, by the way, in case you want to see it. 201 geocaches defined before you die. So, yeah, this was interesting because I didn't want to go off of somebody else's list. You know what I mean? I wanted to kind of make a fresh list. And so that's how this kind of started and that's how I got interested in the whole Lower Wilson score on Project GC.
Which we need to talk about, but before we get into that, we have an email from Limax.
Yes.
So actually, why don't we do that? And hopefully Chris will be jumping in before too long. He's listening in, but
he's not there yet.
He's not able to get in yet.
Well, it's hard to go from whatever he's using for a workstation. It's an old IBM AT or something. He's trying to build the Windows 8 on it.
No, I'm sure it's just Windows 10 and
XT.
It's here. You have to do this update now. Really, you do.
Right now.
Yeah, you don't have a choice.
Exactly.
But Limax emailed saying that he heard you discuss the Lower Wilson score on your podcast, but didn't really get a good idea of what that was about. And Jesse cut you off when you were getting to the good part.
Okay.
And Limax says he'd love to hear more about it, but I have the feeling I'll have to do more research. So he goes on. As far as lists go, I was looking over what I have for lists of as of right now. For a long time, I was only using 3 bookmarks now lists. One for puzzles I was working on, one for puzzles that I solve but not found, and one for puzzles that I found but not solved, which is another great use for lists that I totally forgot to mention. Is I always put my solved puzzles on those lists. I don't bother with the unsolved because those again used to go into Evernote, and I kind of still have been doing that still in Evernote, but I put the unsolved ones in essentially like a notebook that's tagged so that these are the ones that I haven't solved. Move those notes into the solved list and then add the cache with the corrected coordinates on
Right.
geocache.com
Yep.
to that bookmark list, so I can just grab that bookmark list and keep it in there.
Right. Which is great.
Getting back to the email though, I do know that I should claim those fines, but the completist in me couldn't handle signing the log until I knew how the coordinates were derived.
Okay. I understand.
Yeah. Then these days I have other lists for recent special trips that I've gone on, such as the Gold Rush and Admissions Day, as well as caches by certain hiders that have great series. One list is a set of 4 solar system models by the same hider. One was adopted. And of course, one by my favorite hider, Bass Cantor, whose cache descriptions bring out the muse in me. The one problem with that list is it doesn't update dynamically when he publishes new caches. I just realized his bobsled caches aren't in the list. My main idea for making lists was to make pocket queries so that I could import them into Cachely. Once I've done that, it's easy to maintain them on there. With the geocachinger app, those lists now show up twice, once as a PQ and once as a list. And with all of my other PQs, it's very cumbersome to find results. I'm heading off to Massachusetts and I'm going to have some time to do geocaching. What would be a good time to find some of the older and more rare caches? Except he said couches.
Yeah, it's okay.
I didn't even notice that.
You can find rare. You're up in Massachusetts. There are probably a lot of manufacturers, like old, early history couches you can find up there. There's probably an old couch in the State Hall in Boston. Oh, that's a different show. That's Couch Talk.
Talking about Cachely, though, Cachely does do the list. It's just in a different spot. It doesn't put them all together.
Yeah.
Which kind of annoys me. Once it's an offline thing, I kind of want it all in the same spot.
Well, he also has a good point that I mean, you're not going to have it, but it's a neat idea. Would be if you could create a list that updates dynamically whenever, like if you have like a favorite hider.
Well, for that, I would just use a pocket query.
Right, and it would search for that person for those caches based on that. Yeah.
Right, because you can do that search. Actually, maybe you can't do that search by hider. Ooh, now I'm going to have to check.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. But while I'm doing that, why don't you get into the Lower Wilson?
Yes. So for the book, I decided I want to do some kind of list, and so as I put in the beginning of the book, I put my first chapter is about why these lists, and so I'll read you a little paragraph where it says, if you're a geocacher, then the answer to this question is why not, or it's about time. If you're not a geocacher, then I talk about I hope that you become one, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea is that we make lists of geocachers. We make lists. They just might not be very good lists because we don't take the time to think maybe about what caches do we really want to find, or what would inspire us to find a certain types of caches. So what I did was I kind of started to think about that and say, well, what are some things that I want to do? And so I wanted to find caches that were popular and not just favorite point. Although I do have, my first chapter is called Top 20 Favorite Caches, because we can all go find that list. You go search, filter for all. I did US because it was a little hard to look at the whole world at one time because it's a very different type thing. So I decided I'm going to look at the US. You could do this with whatever state you're in or whatever country you're in, and you could do just by favorites. And so, which is an interesting list in itself. As you know, that list is pretty much like Geocaching HQ and the Original Stash, Mingo, those kind. But what I found fascinating was those are most favorited, but they're not the most popular. And what I used for that was what's in Project GC. It's called Lower Wilson, lower bound of Wilson score confidence interval for a Bernoulli parameter. How about that for a mouthful?
That's too many words.
Right. So I just talk about it as Lower Wilson, but it's how you can determine if a cache is popular. It's useful whenever you want to know with confidence what percentage of people took some sort of action. And that's the whole point behind Lower Wilson is it's not just an average of, but it's based on it's used a lot of times for when you have a rating system. Amazon doesn't do this, by the way, but a lot of more popular consumer type places look at Lower Wilson because you want to look at, is the cache, or did somebody take some sort of action? And what the Project GC guy did was he created this formula, or he's using this formula to not, as he explains this, normally with this formula, everyone who doesn't give a point is down rating the item. But since favorite points only exist for those with premium memberships, we're only counting the data for premium members, which of course isn't the greatest way to do it, but it is an interesting way to look at it, I think, is to look at if somebody finds a cache, in their premium, did they take the time to put a premium, to put a favorite point on it? And that's a whole other, that's for a whole other show about favorite points. But that's the point of the Wilson score is if a person can take action, did they take action? And then basically that's where the lists come around to which is, I think, fascinating. So right now, the most popular cache in the U.S. Is GC6 NDY, Nancy David Yahoo. I don't know what the actual. If Chris were here,
cheat sheet.
Chris would do it. 6. So it's GC6 Nancy David Yahoo 6. I'm creating my own now. And so that is a cache by the Caching Dead up in New York. And it is a list of, it's a letterbox. And it's got 55 favorite points and has 55 finds, which is kind of cool. Now, the more finds and favorite points it has, the rating will change. It'll go up. So now, as soon as he gets to, if it was 55 favorite points and 56 finds, of course, your rating system it drops. But it's fascinating to look at different ones. And that one, of course, it was interesting enough, didn't make the book because at publishing time, it didn't have 50 finds. And I wanted to come up with a way to, on top of the Wilson score, I wanted to come up with a way to augment it a little bit. And so I basically cut it off. I said, if it doesn't have 50 finds, I'm not going to put it in there. Because like, Daryl, anything that doesn't have if you don't have a lot of data, the numbers get skewed. So even though the Wilson score takes into account some of that, it can't factor it down to like 5, although it does do a pretty good job of keeping that list or the ratings accurate.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more than just like the average number of favorite points to finds by premium members, which is what a lot of us are used to as kind of that gauge.
Yeah.
If you're not a premium member, you can't assign favorite points.
Right. And so, as Chris would point out, it's not always about.
Hear you.
It's interesting to look at the most favorited cache, but it's kind of interesting to look at the most popular, and that's what Laura Wilson does for you.
Now, going earlier, you cannot do the search by the hider on the pocket queries.
You cannot? Okay.
No, you can do it from the new advanced search, but you can't do it from the pocket queries. And I could have sworn it was in there. And then when we started talking about it, it dawned on me, you know what? I don't think that was.
It'd be cool to have.
So, boo. Yeah, it should be one of those things that's in there. But you can't do it that way. You can go to the hider and get the list of all of their caches.
Right.
Go to the profile, go to their geocaches, and you can get the list of all of their caches. You can get a list of all of their multis only if that's what you want too. So, or traditionals, they break it down so there's one click from their list there.
But a pocket query run once a week would never pick up on that.
Correct. Yeah, because that's something that you can only do on the website. You can also use that new advanced search and do hidden by as a username. So that's in the advanced search if you want to do that. And from there, you could build a list of those caches. But again, it's not going to automatically update. You can, once you've built that, bookmark that URL and get it. But again, he's trying to get it into like Cachely or into the GPS. So it doesn't really do what he needs.
Right. And when he's talking about another item I want to point out, because Limax is talking about he's going to a certain part of the country. If you have Project GC, I don't know about if you can do this on GSAC or not. So I don't know, but I know on Project GC, you could you can go into statistics under in Project GC, and you could do it by state. If you want to find the most popular cache in a state, you could do it that way. Or as I did in the book, I did it by cache type. So one of the chapters is the 20 most popular Earth caches or the 20 most popular multi-caches. And then I also broke them out in the back of the book into states, so that if you're in a certain state, and you could do this on your own too. I'm just saying that, for him, he's talking about going to Massachusetts, and he could do his own list for that state. Well,
Chris, more likely he's going to want to do local to where he's going, because he doesn't necessarily want to travel all over the state. So,
well, that's true. Yeah, you could do it that way too.
Yeah, you can start looking for those caches in those areas and put it in, figure out what you want to try.
And in Project GC, you could even break it down further, like you said, in a county or parish. You could do it by a certain location of that state. So, but you've got a few out there, Chris. Now, in the book, I had to take the HQ GeoTour and put it into one list because it kind of messed up the list, because not surprisingly, everybody gives a favorite point on the HQ GeoTour.
Dude, it seems to every cache on the GeoTour gets a favorite point.
Right. Which gets back to the point for making the book was, is that really the most popular? Or
now,
is it?
Don't get me wrong. They're fabulous caches. There's a lot of effort put into them, but it really does skew the most favorited caches in Washington State. Yeah.
And there were so many of them. Like I said, it skewed that particular list, and so I just put them all into one. But the other thing I found fascinating was when I broke these down into actual cache types, I found that there are certain parts of the country that have, I wouldn't say a bias, but around Chicago, people love letterboxes. And apparently there are a lot of good letterbox hybrids in the Chicago area.
I was going to say, I don't know. Yeah. Scott's turned me on to some, but they're not his. No. Scott, though, turned me on to the really big, cool one that's really old, and that's Vampire Empire.
Yes, which is in here.
And I think because of that cache, it kind of made people aware that they could be good, cool caches and raise the bar, and everyone then started to do them. So it's one of those situations where a good cache spurs interest, spurs more good hides like it.
And there are a ton in Chicago of all play. I mean, it just was interesting to see, but like, you know, Irish Cub Fans 2000th, which is it's an audio letterbox hybrid where you listen to an audio as it walks you around, sort of the old podcatcher kind of
Concept,
idea. Yeah, concept. And so there's several. What's interesting, I want to ask Chris if he has ever found, it's in Bellingham, Washington, but it's called Geo Post Office and TB Transfer Station. Does that sound familiar at all?
No, it doesn't. Bellingham is, I mean, almost as far up in Washington as you can get without hitting Canada.
Oh,
so
okay.
I rarely get up that way. Tell me a little bit about it, and I'll see if I found
it. They call it a full service Geo Post Office, and when you go there, it has a special. It has a Canada bound travel bug suite at it. It has a US bound travel bug suite. It has a swag exchange. It has a passport photographer, so that I think it's similar to where you stand in a certain spot, sort of like a webcam type deal, and you can get a photo. You can get free Wi-Fi there, and it has a cancellation stamp and a pad available for your convenience because it's a letterbox.
Nice.
It's one, it has a wireless beacon component as well. So it's like
I've never found one of those.
It's number 8 on the most popular letterbox hybrids in the country. So
Gary, would you give me the GC code of that one? If you
yes,
you have it right in front of you, I assume, right?
I have it right here.
Yeah. Now, what book is that? How could I find this?
It's on Amazon. It's
okay.
201 geocaches to find before you die.
See, if you want to save time, Chris, you can just check the show notes once we publish the show tonight, and then you can just click on it.
I'll send you the Word doc. No. It is GC4 X-Ray 31 Charlie.
Very good.
You like that? I messed it up earlier. And we were wanting you here to help me with the radio call letters. But
I put it in the chat.
Cool.
Yeah,
yes.
But you know what? Limax beat you to it.
Oh.
Did he really?
He did.
That guy. No, I have not found that one.
Well, and this gets back to the whole idea behind lists is that most geocachers that have been around a while, all three of us have been around the sport for quite a while.
We're closer to the birth or to the death than to the birth right now, but okay.
Right. But we all kind of have lists. And so that's why we were talking about lists tonight. And that is, but this was fascinating because it was a list that I had never really looked at before. We've all looked at Fizzy. We've all looked at Jasmer. As I mentioned earlier about the caches that oldest cache in a state. Those are cool. But I'd never looked at a list of the most popular. And this was fascinating because there are caches in here, again, I'd never heard of, but are amazing, like that one. So.
Okay, Gary. I'm going up to Canada in the next couple of weeks. It's about a mile off of I-5.
There you go.
I will send you a picture when I find it.
Yes, please. Yes. In fact, I've got the in the book. I've got the picture of the little. I won't spoil it for you, but I have a picture of the cancellation stamp that you get. So definitely,
yes, I see.
make sure you take your.
I'll stamp it right on my phone.
There you go.
Yep, there you go. And of course, one of the chapters is the 20 oldest because that's a cool list to look at the 20 oldest geocaches.
And I'm going to have to speak for the Northwest. A lot of them are out here.
They are. There's a ton up there. I mean, what's interesting too, though, is to look at that because there's something like the Spot in New York, And I know most people that live up in the New York State know about the spot, but it's one of those that maybe one of us might overlook if we're making a list, if we're in that sort of area. But it's a little hard to get to. It's a good difficulty terrain for those that love difficult and high terrain, high difficult. But again, it's one that you kind of don't want to miss it if you're in that area. Now that's on a different list. That's a 20 oldest. A lot of people have that kind of list with them, but then a lot of times people don't. I mean, that's just an item that I find interesting. Maybe not everybody. Some people may want to be, some people are sort of, they got the blinkers on and they're looking at just Jasmer, or they're looking at just Fizzy. But I'm wondering how often we don't make lists based on maybe what we're really interested in. We're doing lists based on what somebody else tells us that we're supposed to be doing.
Oh, so I'm not supposed to go find this because you told me about it.
No, that's different.
Is this what? Oh, okay. No, but I completely agree with you. You know, you go to an event and you hear people talking, "Oh, this is such a great cache." Oh, well, then I need to go find it.
Right. Why is it good? I mean, and that's where we can get, I mean, and that's what why I wanted to avoid with the book, was because I had a lot of people going. I even had West Virginia Tim going, "Hey, Gary, you need to put this cache in your book." And I was like, I understand, Tim, you love this cache, but I'm wanting to focus on the most popular, which is a tough thing to look at. It really was, but it was interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ben in the live chat is asking if you found that clever TB hotels made a significant portion of the popular caches. Is that something that you could even answer that quickly?
There are quite a few, but not as many as you. Under most popular caches. No,
yeah.
The top 20 most popular, it didn't really come up as often as I thought it would. The 20 most popular caches there are a lot of puzzles, as you can imagine. There are a couple of those challenges made it in, like the Massachusetts 351 challenge. There are some multicache. It's a pretty good list. It's it's a pretty spread out list. But it's interesting that there really aren't that many travel bug hotels, surprisingly. But I thought there'd be more challenge cache popular, because if you think about it, if you do a challenge like the Massachusetts challenge is defined, and why it's 351 is there's 351 towns in Massachusetts, and somebody has come up with a list of and apparently they're still active, but there's a cache in all 351 towns in Massachusetts, and if you complete that, you then can go find this challenge cache and sign the log. But think about it. Everyone's going to give it a favorite point. You just finished 351 towns in a state. You're going to go, you're going to go give it you're probably going to give it a favorite point. So I was thinking, is there going to be a lot of those? And there really isn't, surprisingly. New Hampshire's on the list. There's one called New Hampshire 234. Sorry, the New Hampshire 234 challenge. Massachusetts 351 challenge, by the way, is GC 48 Charlie Romeo 5. And so, if you look at that one, I'm going to take a quick look at it, because it doesn't have a lot of finds, and I was worried that this was going to become sort of the norm for every list, but it turned out it wasn't. 48
in the show notes there if you want to go click on it, Gary.
5. Okay, cool. that cache has 69 favorite points, and it has 72 finds. So almost every
Wow.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah. But has only been found 69 or only been found 72 times.
Well, that's a hard one to qualify for.
It is very hard. And so I was surprised that these type of caches didn't fill up the most popular cache list. Enough other caches were available to make up the list, and that's why also I decided to separate into chapters, because I didn't want the Earth caches in a sense because some people favorite Earth caches differently than Where I Goes, for example. Both my co-hosts love to snipe at each other. Jesse loves Where I Goes, Sydney loves Earth caches, and so it's fun to kind of hear them bicker back and forth a little bit about it. But I wanted to separate them a little bit because I wanted there to be an opportunity for each cache type to sort of shine as a popular type.
Well, and each cache definitely, or each cache type definitely has its appeals.
Right. And we all look at, one of your favorites is was the number one virtual, which is the Toilet Seat Museum.
Oh, I like that one.
In San Antonio. So I assume you probably gave that one a favorite point when you were down there. Of course.
If nothing else, for the poem that the proprietor told us that he tells everyone that comes in. So
that's that's an example of it's a great cache, but it's a great cache for a whole other reason.
Right. The cache itself is not all that great.
Right.
The location is absolutely fantastic.
Right. And so that's why I think it's great to have different types of lists.
Mm-hmm.
Because but important, I think, and this is, Daryl, I don't know how the best way, I assume would probably be a pocket query or something, but if you're going to a location, then you almost want your lists to be based obviously on where you're going, but you don't want to get tunnel vision. If you get out to, say, Massachusetts and you get tunnel vision, I just want to try to work on Jasmer. Well, what if you're never in this area again? I understand you want to try to work on Jasmer some, but what about something else that you like? And so you've got to weigh those kind of items.
Yeah, and that's definitely where things like the Project GC tools come in handy. But even the advanced search on geocaching.com can do a lot there. Mm-hmm. Just do a search in the area for anything that's 10 favorite points or more. That right there is going to pull out a lot of caches that should be good finds. And then you just go through the list and start cherry picking.
Right. And, I don't think it's a problem. Again, it's your list, so you need to do it the way you want to do it. So if you don't want to do Earth caches, then remove them from your list or whatever. Or if you don't want to do multi caches, if you're not a fan, then, but
absolutely
work your lists, but plan it, make your plans based on, maybe expand your thinking a little bit. Maybe that's what I'm hoping to do in discussing this, is expand the thinking you have about geocaches, and that there's a chance that you might want to look at this Lower Wilson that's in Project GC if you're a Project GC fan, and look at this list. Because again, for me, I found it fascinating, the caches that I had never really thought about or heard about, that now I've added to my list. If I'm going to be, say, in the Washington area, there's that letterbox that even that Chris now can go find, because it's.
I'll sign your name to it.
Oh no, don't do that.
He wants to find it himself.
I want to find it because I have I want to create a list of all these 201 caches, and I want to go find all of them. I haven't found them all yet. Obviously, I found some, but this is my new bucket list, is to try to find these 200 and 201.
So,
Until
are
it
you going to
changes.
die if you find all 201 caches?
No, but I want to find them before I die.
Okay.
So that then he has to
And
do
then
the
once you
next
found them
200.
all,
Yes.
what happens?
I don't know. I've got to come up with some of the list.
No, well, if you look at the title of the book, there's only one action after the caches you find.
have to die.
Yeah, that's what I came up with.
Well,
To go get this cache, I have to drive up through Seattle, and I don't want to do that anymore.
oh man,
Seattle's 45 miles away from me, but it took me 2.5 hours to get from there to here tonight.
oh my gosh.
And it's not a Friday. On a Friday, you expect that. It's a Thursday. I'm like, why? Why would people do this?
I've driven through Seattle, but unfortunately we did it and we never had any problems. So it must have been just a good time of the year, I guess.
There is no good time of year. But anyway.
Well,
Christmas Day.
Yeah, there you go. The last thing I want to mention about this is that this list is obviously ever changing. So there will be updates to the book every year. But
Really?
yeah, the one that's most popular right now didn't make the list because it didn't have enough cache. So and a lot of these are gonna. There's one in Arkansas that somebody mentioned that may end up becoming archived because the location of it is getting sold to another company and they may not leave. It's called Gorilla Stash, and there's a big giant gorilla out front. And so it has survived a lot of different owners, but there's a chance that it might not survive the new owner. And so one of them that didn't make the book that was about to make the book was the one that's at the Space Coast. Mm-hmm. It's the gigantic ammo can out in front of Space Coast but it got archived. And so I pulled it before publication, but so the list is fluid. I understand, but everything that's in the book though, I think is worthy of it, even if it's now number 21 on the list instead of number 20 or whatever. I think more than anything, like I said, I want people to think a little bit outside their normal box of caches, outside the ammo box.
Ooh.
All right.
Ooh.
Now, before we go, and we do have to wrap up because we're running long, everyone gets those caches that people recommend to them. How are you guys keeping track of it? And Chris, why don't we start with you since you were the latecomer?
Oh, gee, thanks for putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
I have a list, a bookmark list I created a long time ago. Old caches near me. So these are old caches within 100 miles of my house. And we're talking old, 2001, 2002, maybe 2003. And they get found on a regular basis. And those are the ones that I look at and go, they're close. Why am I not going to get these? So that's been my motivation recently, is like, okay, there are 2 up in Seattle. Yes, I have to fight the stinking traffic. But I'm going to go, I almost did it on Saturday, but we had a family thing come up and it didn't work out. But it was just one of those things. I'm just going to jump in the car, probably on a weekend, head up there. There's 2 caches right there, either side of Seattle, that were placed in 2001. They need to be found by me before they disappear.
Yeah, that's always a worry too, is, those old caches probably are going to stick around for a while, but at the same time, their chances of surviving that much longer.
They're both in well-established parks, but who's to say they're not going to do some construction in that park and that hiding spot will disappear? So
yeah, or a fire or flood or something, you just never know.
Famine, zombie attack, we don't know.
Yeah.
Any natural disaster.
The zombie apocalypse hits and, those caches are gone.
Is that a natural disaster? It's an unnatural disaster.
Well, it depends on the cause of the zombies.
So those are the things that I look at. I because I live here in the Northwest, the home, the mecca of geocaching, those older caches are a real draw to me.
All right, and Gary, how do you keep track aside from the book of the caches?
He wrote a book in order
People are
to
just
do
like
that.
telling you, yeah.
carry the book around with me. It's bookmark lists. I mean, I really am a huge fan of bookmark lists. I got too many of them. I need to pare it down a little bit, but
You need to make a list of your lists.
I do. I need to make a bookmark list of bookmarks. So and then put them into Cachly, and just I use Cachly so much now that but it changes a little bit. I started working on. It's like work on Fizzy for a while. It's like, let's work on Jasmer for a while, because I'm pretty close. I'm not too far off on Jasmer. Susan and I could probably get a concerted effort and finish Jasmer, but I get distracted. Surprised I finished a book or two, but I tend to be the little ADHD on that stuff, but. No, that's the way I keep them. That's really the best way, is bookmark lists.
Yeah, for most of the like challenge kind of stuff, I use Project GC and the virtual GPS to track that kind of thing. But specifically for the cool caches that I hear about from other people, like even the ones that come up on the Geocache of the Week on the Latitude 47 blog. Actually, it's not called that anymore. It's just called Geocaching Blog, I think. In any case, those I just tend to drop into one bookmark list. And if I'm, near any of those, hey, I can just check that list and see where they are. And, that's one of the things that I tend to do. If I'm traveling to an area, I'll go and check it, because I have caches right now. I just took a look. It's just over North America for some reason. And I don't have any of the ones in Europe anymore. And that might be because they got archived.
Yeah, that's possible. And we're talking a lot about Project GC, but I love the Project GC items because, like you said, you can keep those. You can keep those lists, and you can import. You can export that into a spreadsheet or however you want to do them. You can do them all sorts of different ways, but it's very handy.
Are you referring to the virtual GPS there, Gary?
Yeah,
Project GC.
Yes,
which is a premium member feature of Project GC. So you have to have both the geocaching.com and the Project GC premium memberships.
It's not much. It's a dinner out. It's a dinner out. Once a year, you pay for that. So
yeah, no, and by all means, I do recommend doing it if you're going to use it, and you can start playing with the features enough to know that you're going to use Project GC, and pay for it.
It's worth it.
I think. It's just keep in mind that you're not going to be able to use it as a free member.
Not the virtual GPS.
Correct.
90% of Project GC you can use as a free member.
Yes, exactly. All right, and we better get moving. But before we do, Gary, tell people once again how to get that book and also about your show.
Sure. The show's Geocache Talk. It's on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Central. And I am now with co-hosts Jesse Lunsford, Memphis Mafia, and Sydney Sawyer, Sherman Air 18. And we're on weekly. And the book is called 201 Geocaches to Find Before You Die, based on if we've all seen the 1,000 Places to Visit Before You Die kind of books. And that's where I got the idea for the book. So it's on Amazon, or if you're overseas, you can get them off CreateSpace, all one word, createspace.com. So there you go.
Thank you very much. And I do also want to thank all of our listeners who emailed, wrote us, whatever, a lot of different means about the beeping issues that we talked about last week. Now, this seems to be tied to the Hangouts audio from what we've heard from everyone. And it is in the Hangouts that go to YouTube and that you're hearing live. And I can see that the sound is, in fact, coming back from Google. So we have to see what we can do to try to fix that. But in the meantime, I think I found a recipe that will hopefully address it for the audio-only podcast listeners. Unfortunately, that might affect the sound quality a little bit, especially the voices are going to sound a little different because it's EQ and some gating, which means it doesn't leave the voices unaffected. But hopefully this will solve that problem, and everyone will have a much better experience from the audio-only podcast.
Or I could just stop backing up.
Oh, is that the noise everybody's hearing?
Yeah. Beep, beep, beep.
Well, and the worst part is this is a sound that we've been noticing, but I've been referring to it as a ticking because it sounds different coming through the earphones live than it does when it's played back after the compression.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh.
And what it is, I think, that was causing these different problems is it's a frequency response. So different speakers and different headphones are going to represent it a little bit differently because it seems to be up at the I can't remember where I was looking, but it's like the high range, though, I think.
Interesting.
And of course, I have a low cutoff on the board,
right?
But we don't have any of those functions on Hangouts.
Yeah, on the Googles.
Right, and the low cutoff isn't going to help me with this.
No. You need a high. Well, you need the opposite of a high
cut
filter. Yeah, you need a high cut. Well, you know what, Daryl? While you're working on all that, I want to remind the patrons their next Hangout is going to be June 20th. And, who knows? I could even be on time for that one.
Hopefully you won't be going up to Seattle and getting lost.
I didn't get lost. I knew exactly where I was. I just couldn't move.
So you didn't lose your car in traffic?
No, I stayed with it the whole time. I went slow enough that I hatched eggs in Pokemon Go.
Oh, nice.
On the freeway.
And you got the extra XP for the Special Fire and Ice event.
Yep.
Cool.
So, I mean, that tells you the speed I was going was under 12.5 miles an hour. Yeah.
Nice. Fun. All right. We do have some great shows coming up, though. Next week, we're going to be talking with a retired guy about his caching on the road, so check that one out. Then it's another randomized show, and we've got a bunch of topics in there already, but if you have anything that doesn't quite make a whole show, send that in, and we might drop it in on that June 29th episode, which is episode 287. Then on July 6th, our first one in July, Gary, we're going to have one of your co-hosts on. We're going to steal her.
That's fine. Go for it.
Shermanator ET is going to be back, and we're going to be talking about multi-device caching. So caching with the smartphone, the GPS, the nav unit, your iPad, your does anyone
laptop,
actually fire with laptop? I was going to say, does anyone actually try to use a Fire tablet? I don't think there's any software that really would help you with that. Whatever else.
A Nuvi, like a car GPS.
The nav units, yeah.
The nav units, yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about all of that on July 6th. So if you have anything to send in for any of those, we appreciate that feedback, and it really does help shape the shows. That's GeoGearHeads at Cachemaniacs.com.
You know what? I was going to just mention that because you need to go check the Cachemaniacs website at Cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners. So leave us feedback by emailing that email address that Daryl just said. That's GeoGearHeads at Cachemaniacs.com or through the many channels of social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer, if I'm here on time, and Daryl Wattenberg. This show's copyright 2017 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.